Welcome, I'm Darren, and I'll be your guide today as I rank the worst hockey card designs for 1993. When I did the worst of list for baseball, I was surprised at how many of the card sets in baseball I thought were basically above average. Hockey was kind of the opposite. I was surprised at not so much that there were a bunch of that all card sets were terrible, but they were all underwhelming in terms of just in my mind what the 1993 card designs. I knew pretty much what they looked like, and there was an expectation I had going into it, going, okay, these are all going to look great. And I was surprised that they were all underwhelming compared to what I was expecting. But that's just kind of the idea that you have in mind. And the reason that the cards didn't read as well as I had anticipated, I'll definitely be getting into that here because there are 10 sets that I consider to be the main card designs for 1993, which is great. That means half of them are good, half of them are not so good. And in this case, none of the card designs are bad. But it's surprising how, what's really surprising is who ended up at the top of this list. That really did throw me off. It's going to throw all of you off. But at any rate, starting off this list, I start it off with 1993 Leaf Hockey. And in the case of Leaf, this is very much indicative of the whole problem because this card is a really nice card. It's the same design as they used in baseball, which is a really nice design. And I was looking at this and I was looking at Don Russ trying to, because they were in the middle, which one do I go with? And the Leaf card is fancier. But at the end of the day, the Don Russ card is stronger in its image. It reads better. In this case, it just doesn't. The card tends to get kind of washed out. And the design elements at the bottom, when that happens, they disappear. You don't see them. And then in other cases, the card design is very strong and you are able to see it down at the bottom and you realize it's a big wedge. I mean, literally just a wedge. And that's kind of weird because Ultra had a wedge at the bottom of its card, but it didn't read as a wedge for a number of different reasons. One of which was they had these horizontal bands that broke it up, but just the way the Ultra designed it looked so much better. In this case, it's way too blocky, way too boxy, way too sharp and angular. And for the hockey cards, for some reason, they don't read as well as the baseball cards. And so I look at this card, and when everything finally comes together and I see the whole card, I go, it's nice. And that's the problem. Every time I look at the card, all I can think is it's a nice card. I don't really get excited about it. But the image may not stand out and the design element might not stand out. But when I look at the card, I do see the whole card. And I think it's a nice card. So that's why I have it at number 5 and I don't have it lower because everything else is going to be a lot less successful at being a card that actually looks like a nice card. Number 4, I have Topps Premier. And Topps Premier has a big problem. It looks an awful lot like O-Pee-Chee Premier with good reason. This was all Topps did for Topps this year. And I have to admit, Topps was doing a good job with images. And in hockey, that's pretty rare. Not a lot of card companies did a really good job with images, and Topps was actually doing pretty well. In fact, that's why I have this card here at number 4, because I'm not a fan of the design, but the images look really good. So when I go through and I look at these images, it catches my eye and I get kind of excited about the player. So for me, the image doesn't have to read as a dominant element on the card, but it really helps because look, that's the whole point. That's why we're here. There was a time way in the past when we were collecting cards because of the players, because of the teams. That's what we were focused on, and we wanted to see them. Nowadays, that's not the case, but at the time, that very much was the case. And this is a card where when I look at it, I see the player. And the card design's not that great, but at least I get excited about the player, and to me, this is a card that does a really good job. Not a great job, but a really good job of making sure that the player is first and foremost, and that's pretty unusual on this list. In fact, when I move over to 3, to the other top set, which was Stadium Club, here Stadium Club was doing a better job with images, and the card images read a lot better than they had in the years past. Unfortunately, they're still pretty busy. And busy not in a too much stuff kind of way, and there's too much going on for the player to really pop out of the card. So you would normally want for the card design to really carry you, but the card design gets lost in the card to an extent. But the design element, there's the gold foil, but then there's the color band. And for hockey, they used a blue color band, which I really like the blue or the red that they used in baseball, but I got to admit that in hockey, I don't think that would have worked. If a card was for one of the red teams, like the Detroit Red Wings, I think that the red band would have gotten kind of lost in the theme of the card, and then with the other teams, it would have clashed. With the blue, it doesn't matter if it's the Blue or the Hartford Whalers or whoever the team happens to be that happens to have blue, it doesn't really blend with those teams too well. And then when you have one of the red teams, it doesn't clash. To me, they actually got the right color. It may not have the strength of what we had in baseball, but in hockey, I think they did the right choice in terms of the color, which helps all of the cards work. Now, the images aren't really strong and the design element isn't really strong, and that's the real problem that this card has, which the Premier cards definitely did have, at least on one side of the fence. So it's kind of a mixed bag, but in the case of Stadium Club, it is a nice card. It's really lacking in terms of what it needs to really pop out. And to put it more bluntly, when I'm looking at cards, these Stadium Club cards don't jump out at me. When I notice them, then I can really see them, but I have to go out and notice them. They're not going to make a statement on their own. So that's what I've got at number 3. When I move on to number 2, I'm going to 93 Pinnacle. And I have never been a fan of the 93 Pinnacle set. 91, great design. 92, great design. 93, unfortunately, they went with a very simplistic approach. And every time I look at the card, I really want to like it. I look at it and go, okay, that's really fancy. They went with a very fancy version of a card, but the thing is, I just lose interest. That's what happens with this card. There's nothing about the card that pulls me in. Look, give me a splash of color or something to catch my eye and pull me in, because when I look at the image, unfortunately, the white text at the top and the bottom grabs my attention, pulls me away, and then that image gets stuck inside of the frame. There's no cohesiveness, and the image doesn't have any vibrance. Even when the shot of inside the image is a vibrant image, it just doesn't read well on this card. And I just did the baseball 1997 baseball score set, and that has a very similar theme and it has a very similar problem. Although the 97 score set is a better design and it feels fancier, it has many of the same components, and I don't know what Score was thinking when they did either one of these sets. In the case of the Pinnacle set, none of the shots are able to carry the amount of strength that I want for these cards to carry. The border is too distracting and the whole thing loses interest. And once again, this is a card that doesn't grab my attention, which is not good. But moving on to number 1, this is the shocker, which is 1993 Ultra. Of all sets, how in the world can 93 Ultra be, in my opinion, the worst card design for hockey? And that's because it runs completely together. It is about as boring of a card as you're going to find. Not because the elements of the card are boring, they look really nice, but they don't do anything. And that is truly the cardinal sin, because for 93 Ultra, the big thing about it is that it had strong elements that worked well with the images. And hockey is all about these super busy images. I mean, super, super busy. Now, basketball has busy images as well, but there's a balance to it, and the players are still able to somewhat silhouette in the shots. Now, it could be that that's the way that the card companies manufacture them, and in hockey it's not quite as strong. But it also could be that I'm a basketball card collector and not a hockey card collector, so I know how to see the basketball cards, not the hockey cards. But I'm pretty sure that the hockey cards just tend to get too busy, which means you've got to work a lot harder to get them to really work, like we saw with Topps Premier. In this case, they didn't do that at all. And so while in basketball, 93 Ultra was sensational, it had strong elements for the border elements down at the bottom, or the design elements at the bottom, and the images tended to read as distinct, so that when you look at the card, you see the player and you actually see the player. In the case of hockey, most of these cards, you can't see the player, and even the border elements get blended in. That gray marble down at the bottom doesn't work. The two color bands don't have the ability to be strong on their own. They need the border element to grab your eye and then work together as a team. And in the case of these hockey cards, that gray marble just disappears. And there are some cases where the images actually do stand out, like with Adam Oates. The Adam Oates card actually does all the right things for this card. Because the ice covers the entire card, that means the player is silhouetted, the border element down at the bottom is distinct, and those two color bands actually pop right off. You still can't quite see the logo, but otherwise all the right things are happening, and yet the card's still boring. The shot of the image is, or the shot of the player is not good because he's too distant, and there's a personality that's missing from it. The border element still doesn't have a lot of strength. So even when everything goes right, these cards really fall short. But I think the best way to put it is, okay, so here we've got Pavel Bure. If I want to get a Pavel Bure card from 1993, this is not the card I want to get. Absolutely. This is about the bottom of the list of Pavel Bure cards I want. Because when I look at this card, to me, this is just checking off a checklist. Got this one, good, I'm out of the way. Now I can move on to the rest of the cards. Because when I look at this card, I don't see Pavel Bure. Look, that's the whole point. We're collecting cards of players. So shouldn't we see the player? Or shouldn't we at least notice the card and remember the image of the card and go, oh yeah, that card. That's what these are. These are marketing. It's literally marketing. And so here you've created marketing that is forgettable. It just completely disappears. And I mean, how can that possibly be anything other than the worst cardinal sin that a card design could ever suffer from? And that's the problem. This card set is it's not even underwhelming. I don't notice it. I don't remember it. There's nothing about the card that stands out. And it's a shame because it's a gorgeous card. But there is nothing distinct about it. And that's just not good at all. So sadly, I like the Topps Premier cards a whole lot better, even though the Topps Premier cards have a terrible design and Ultra has a great design, but I can't see the Ultra cards. So that's where I have the list of the worst cards for hockey in 1993. And I guarantee you the Ultra is not going to show up on either basketball or football, which I'm going to be doing in the next couple of weeks. So look out for those videos. And then I'm going to wrap up with looking at the worst card designs across all the sports. And it'll be interesting to see how they all line up. So definitely look out for that. If you haven't subscribed, I do urge you to do so. And well, yeah, thank you very much for watching.